All right, it's time to talk basketball. I'm Jose Salviati, editor at thebeachbasket.net. He's Steve Prisciello, a longtime educator, vice principal, and athletic director, as well as high school coach. And this is the 13 Rules Random NBA Thoughts podcast. Undeniably the best 15 minutes of NBA random thoughts online anywhere. If this is your first time listening, welcome. We're glad you found us. This podcast was born out of the content in Steve's Random NBA Thoughts articles, which he publishes weekly. Steve and I have exactly 15 minutes to discuss what's on his mind around the NBA. Today, we'll discuss his latest 13 Rules NBA Random Thoughts article with a focus on his thoughts after week one. So early thoughts on certain teams and maybe certain players. Let's talk about it. Steve, are you ready?
Ready.
Let's do this. I'm going to start the timer now. So as usual, Steve talked about a lot of things. We're not going to hit them all up, but we will link his article below. But he did start. Let me talk to him. Actually, you did start with the Knicks. You said you tried to calm the fears of Knicks fans. You told them not to despair. But you also then called out a flaw in the Knicks team. So why should Knicks fans rather not despair? And what's that flaw with their team?
Well, they have too much talent to be a bad team. They're very talented.
Yeah.
I think the problem is that this team is completely different than last year's team. Last year's team played hard, defended real well, and made you earn everything. Karl Anthony Towns playing center isn't a good thing because in any pick and roll, he plays drop. If you watch the game with Boston, any good NBA player can shoot the three wide open. All Boston did was run a lot of pick and rolls with Towns getting involved, and they came off it and had wide open threes. The other thing was the game, when you thought about it, was a mismatch. And why was it a mismatch? Because the Knicks had a new team. They have to get used to each other. It takes time. Boston looks like they got out of bed and as the champs, and they played like it. If you watch the game, they assisted for about 69% of the baskets. Last year, they assisted for about 60%, which that extra 9% or so tells you that Boston made the extra pass and found the open man all night. And the Knicks, once they ran that screen and roll, Towns dropped, the Knicks were in rotation. So all it took was that one more pass and somebody had a wide open three. I think they'll make adjustments, but I think they have a problem. Just to go with that, after I printed, I believe Thursday night, the Knicks played Indiana, and they beat them pretty easily. But what I was really surprised was Indiana did not go at make Towns defend. And it was really surprising because Indiana's a good three-point shooting team, and they can do a lot of things, but they never made Towns become part of the defense. And if you're not going to attack Towns and indirectly Brunson, who's usually on the other side of the pick and roll, you're defeating yourself. There's an old thing in the NBA. If you have two bad defensive players, you don't have a good defense. Brunson's not a great defensive player. He does take a charge and he does block the middle up at times on drives, but he's not a great individual defensive player. Towns is not a good defensive player. So now you've only got three. And one more thing they don't have great ball pressure. And if you don't pressure the ball, that's what Boston was getting anything they wanted off of that because there was no pressure. So the ball handler can go anywhere he wanted, and they were just playing in front of him. Those are issues that they've got to solve to be good, or they go the other way and just try to outscore teams. Those are the choices, but they have too much talent to really not, do well.
Yeah. Interesting. You talked about this last week. Thibodeau hung his hat on being a defensive coach, and here he's got a team that kind of lacks that ability. Interesting note, though, because you called it out, the Boston Celtics made NBA record 29 made three-pointers against the Knicks. Missed their last 13 or 12 in a row, which was hilarious, but could not get that 30th. But they absolutely decimated the Knicks.
Well, they did, and they were shooting over 50% before they missed those 30.
right?
13.
I think they were at 60 at one
But
point.
don't forget, again, it wasn't – Boston's a good shooting team, but it wasn't about their shooting as much as they're wide open.
Yeah.
And that was the piece that was hard. It seemed like the Knicks were a step behind the whole game. And again, teams get better when they get used to each other. And I'm going to use a case in point. Minnesota lost their opening game. They got beaten their opening game. They've got a new team too. There's got to become some melding together. And when they do figure it out, they'll both go on a streak.
Yeah. Yeah. The first week is always an aberration. You got really good teams that aren't going to be really good. You've got really bad teams that aren't going to be really bad. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit later as we move on. Moving on to the next topic, we moved to Charlotte. You had some nice things to say about a team that has been a perennial kind of middle of the road team. They've been either really, really bad or really, really mid. They haven't been really, really good. Is this the season in Charlotte that they're going to be really, really good? Is this the breakout season for the Hornets?
I don't think so, but it's fun to watch them play. They play hard. They do the right thing on the court, and they all trying to defend. They might not have great, even LaMelo, they're trying to defend. So watching them, it's a lot more fun to watch them play than what was. And you can feel like the organization's made a big change. The coach is different. They say the ownership's different. There's a new GM in town. It's all new, and they were playing like that. So anytime a team does that, it's fun because there's an enthusiasm. Just like Detroit, they might be over so far, but they play hard. And there's a little bit of an excitement to their game. Last year, both those teams, before the game started, you knew they were going to lose big because there just wasn't that enthusiastic play involved.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny, and as a fan, that matters too, right? You want to you're drawn to a team that looks like they want to be there, right? That's having fun, not necessarily having fun together. Chemistry I think is overrated. I see those videos all the time. Oh, my team's got all this chemistry. I couldn't care less about that personally, but I want to see them battle. I want to see them going after the 50-50 balls. I want to see them, having fun, making that extra pass. I haven't watched the Hornets yet this season, but it sounds like that's what they're doing.
I think if things run right, and don't forget the Eastern Conference is strong on top, but 6 teams or so, 7 teams that are pretty good, but there's a lot of bad. And I think if things fit right, they have an outside shot at a play-in spot because it's very difficult to name 10 teams. You're saying Chicago and Atlanta would be play-in teams. I'm not sold on them, and you never know what a young, enthusiastic team, what they can accomplish.
Yeah. No, agreed. And happy for Charlotte, happy for those fans, happy for those players, happy for LaMelo, who's from California, not too far from where I'm at. So it's hoping things break well for that team. Moving back to a team that I think has a big following, a team with some championships. That is the Miami Heat. Before the start of the season, you were relatively optimistic about them. But now that the season started and you got to see them a little bit, you've got some concerns about the Heat. What's going on in Miami?
Well, it's interesting. Anytime you track a star player through their career, they don't all of a sudden go from 20-point scorers to 2-point scorers. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But what happens is they don't go out and get you that 25 every night. Jimmy Butler scoring 3 doesn't mean he's finished, but it does mean he's coming into a part of, unless I'm wrong, unless evidence is different, there's going to be nights where he's just not good. Mm. And that's part of, as you age as a player, there's going to be some nights where he goes and gets 40 or 30 or whatever it might be, but there's also going to be the next night where he scores 2 or 5 or 3 like he did the other night. And that's something that goes with it. Now, when I thought about them coming in 4th, and maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm right that they will, I thought Butler would be Butler. If that's not there, there's a problem here. Because though they have some decent pieces, Rozier's a nice player, Hero's a good player, and Adebayo had a bad game, which I don't expect that to happen that often. But unless they pick it up for Butler, they're in trouble. And by trouble, what are they, 7 or 8 in a play-in team type situation? Again, there's enough talent to get them into the playoffs because the bottom part of the East is not strong. But I don't think it makes them what they usually are, a dark horse. I don't. If we have to wait a couple weeks, but they could be a dark horse I mean, not a dark horse in this. Where other years they've always everybody's scared of them.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's going to be this year.
Interesting. Yeah, probably the toughest thing as a fan is to watch your once great team kind of, fall to Father Time like they all do.
The NBA is difficult. If you think about baseball, baseball, you have minor leaguers coming along and it could change things. In football, draft picks, and they can make it. And in football, you need so many guys that a free agent could become a star in the NFL. Sure. In the NBA, you need first 10 picks. And you've got to hit on them. You can't mess them up. I mean, let's think about Detroit with Killian Hayes was the 7th pick in the draft. He's playing for a G League team now. So, those kind of things happen. So for any team, if you go down, it's very difficult. And Boston was lucky using them because they were able to trade Garnett and Pierce and get those picks that became Jaylen Brown and Tatum. If they didn't trade them, and I guess what it's saying is when you see yourself falling, get rid of those guys that have some value because it might be a quicker rebuild.
Toughest call to make, right? Is trade them too early rather than too late.
You're right. There's the old thing, and we go back to 1969, which was my favorite year with Boston. They only won 48 games that season. And winning 48, you're not close to being a good. They came in 4th in their division, but they went for the playoffs and they thought they can win, and they did win. But the point being, sometimes organizations see things like that happen, and they think that it can happen with us, so we stay with them. But by doing that, you're adding about 5 years onto the rebuild.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's easy to sit here and GM, but it's not an exact science. But hoping for the best out in Miami, personally, because again, I think a good team in Miami is good for the NBA. But we're down to a couple minutes left, and I wouldn't be doing anybody justice, and certainly myself, if we skip past the most obvious epiphany that I've ever seen you write about in all the time you've been doing 13 Rules. You said, and I'm saving the best for last, some very nice things about the Los Angeles Lakers, the 3-0 Los Angeles Lakers, the #1 team in every week 1 power ranking, Los Angeles Lakers. Are you ready to admit, Steve Prisciello, that this team, the Los Angeles Lakers, are the team to beat in the West and the prohibitive favorite to win it all this season?
Well, first of all, we have to decide, are they the best team in Los Angeles? Before we can get to the West or anywhere else, we have to figure that out. Now, being the first best team in power rankings, I think the only power rankings they might even be in the top 5 would be yours. Otherwise, I don't, 3 games, there's 79 games left.
They won them all.
Well, they might lose 1 or 2, but so I wouldn't get ahead of myself on that. I would just slow down, enjoy it while it's there. But don't forget, now being serious, JJ Redick became the coach.
Yeah.
What's interesting about this is not like, and if you think about it, it's not like hiring Darwin Ham or anybody else. He had instant credibility because LeBron bought into him. Yeah. So it became a lot easier for him to get his message across and guys to follow. And it's a very important thing in the NBA. And if you think about it, being a head coach in the NBA is most about being your players want to play for you. Redick walked in. If LeBron accepts him, everybody accepts him. And so he's got credibility. And that makes it easier because they're going to do the things. If I remember at the end of the year, Last year, you had D'Angelo Russell eating a sandwich in the corner. You had other guys just waving at Ham and saying, basically, you don't know what the hell you're doing. Now it's a lot different. And there's something to be said. Now, it's a long season. Redick could make his mistakes and things could change, but he's showing signs that he's doing right. I don't know if it's him, because you have to realize the Lakers were smart. They went out and they got Brooks and McMillan as assistant coaches. Those guys have been there. So, and I'm sure Redick is a bright guy. I'm sure he's listening to him. So, I think there's a lot of good ingredients, but the biggest thing is that credibility on a team. You can draw the X and O's all night, but if you are credible, they're going to do what you say. And that's a big, big thing that the Lakers have done.
Yeah. Buy-in is key, right? I think as a coach when your time is done, when you've lost the locker room, right? When there's no longer buy-in, when, like you said, they're eating sandwiches on the bench. That's the start of the end. It has been surprising to me to see essentially the same team who had struggled. I mean, they ended the season on a run, and they showed what they could be, but over the course of 82 games, they struggled last season. But so far, they're defending well, they're playing well. And the only difference is the head coach. Of course, as we know, the pillars of that team, are 40-year-old LeBron, who I'd rather have over just about any 40-year-old, but still 40-year-old LeBron. And, and a suspect, Anthony Davis, who's had a good, healthy season last year. Let's see if it lasts this year. But off to a good start. You'd rather be 3-0 than 0-3.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's a good thing for the league, because, LA is one of the franchises that everybody, pays attention to. So it's a good thing in all ways. Again, I don't know if that will continue, but it's a good thing, because in the NBA, talent usually wins. And I don't know if they have as much talent as the good teams in the NBA.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll take the snippet of positivity from Steve here in LA. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. Welcome to the bandwagon.
I'm looking forward to reading your power rankings. Who did you have number 2?
In the West, Oklahoma City.
Who'd you have number 2 altogether?
I think overall it was also Oklahoma City.
Okay.
I'm not going to tell you where Boston is.
And what about the Knicks in Boston and Philly? Did they get in there?
Philly, no.
Cleveland?
Philly. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, they're all on there. We rank all
sure.
three.
You have to have every team. I'm sure you even guys should have Charlotte in there. But
they're not near the top.
No, who? Charlotte or Cleveland?
Charlotte and Cleveland. If I remember, I'm going off memory now. They're in the middle. That Boston, is top 5 for sure. Pretty good. Keep in mind, our objective power rankings are based on who you play, right?
Right.
So they're a little different. But anyway, I'm going to link that below, and thank you for the plug. But our time is done here, because I've got a whole another show dedicated to the power rankings, which are always problematic at the first week, because you do have teams that are winning and that aren't going to stay there, and teams that are losing, like the Denver Nuggets, are 0-2. They're going to be okay. Trust me.
Well, I don't know about that, but I think they're headed for like a 45-50 win season.
Okay.
And I've talked about no depth and the problems they have, and they lost Caldwell Pope and so on and so forth. But so when you do these power rankings, does it start where you put the Lakers on top, and then you begin like, well, let's see, they lost 3 games this week. Let's drop them to number 3. That kind of thing.
That's what most power rankings do, right? Because they try to put in their fandom into it. We do not. We just let we put all of the games, the wins, the losses into a computer, and it spits out who's where. That's it. Can't argue with our power rankings.
Is it the Laker computer?
It is not a Laker computer. I'm going to end this. Where are we going with this?
Where we always go. Somebody disillusioned, and I'm trying to pull them off pull them off.
That is it. Our time is up. There's just no clean way to end this. No, Thank you for listening. We appreciate it. We have fun. We always love to talk basketball, and we could absolutely go forever. But we want to limit this to about 15 minutes because we are the best 15 minutes of NBA random talks or random thoughts online. Make sure to read Steve's entire article. He talked about a lot more than what we covered here. We'll link it below. We'll also link to the power rankings. Again, thank you for that plug, Steve. And we're excited. This is just week one. It's going to be a great 2024-25 NBA season. Thank you for joining. Thanks for listening. We hope to see you again next week, Steve. We'll talk then.
Take care.
Thanks, man.